everyone, and welcome back to People Jew Wanna Know podcast. I've got a special guest for you today, Leyb. Noy is an IDF soldier and activist. He initially served in the IDF when he was 18 years old, and then he lived in Israel for many years before coming to the U.S. to work and study. Noy has always been an outspoken activist, both against racism and anti-Semitism. On October 7th, Noy was living in New York City and boarded the first flight out to Israel to join his unit in the war against Hamas. His commitment extends beyond the battleground, as he became outspoken on social media, amassing millions of views. I'm sure you've come across his content before, actually. Following his release from Gaza this past January, Noy was supposed to be on vacation like the rest of his team. He saw the quote-unquote other war that was being fought outside of Israel, so Noy traveled to different communities in the US and Canada to share his unique perspective from the inside. He has spoken to tens of thousands of people, ranging from fifth graders to seniors, both Jewish and non-Jewish. In May of 2024, Noy flew back to Israel, this time to the northern border, where the fight is against Hezbollah rather than Hamas, and that's where he's still stationed today. Noy and I recorded while he was on break and staying with his family. He really only has short windows of time when he's not stationed at base, so I have to extend a huge thank you to him for making the time for me. Prior to the war, Noy pursued his MBA at the University of Michigan and then moved to New York, where he co-founded a tech startup in the bachelorette space. Quite different from what he's doing today. Noy is the second soldier we've had on the podcast, but quite different from Adiel Cohen in that he really became a social media activist after the war started, whereas Adiel had been doing it for years prior to the war. I really enjoyed speaking to Noy because he offers a no-bullshit perspective on what's going on the inside. Hearing from him firsthand about Gaza, what it looks and feels like, it's fascinating. His candor is refreshing, and I do hope when he visits New York City next time that we'll get a chance to connect. I think you'll really enjoy this episode, and talking offline to Noy, he also talked about how ultimately he's hoping to settle down and start a family soon, hopefully with the right person. And it's so interesting how the trajectory of our lives can really change in an instant, and Noy's story is a perfect example of that. With that said, I actually know a great girl out in Hoboken, New Jersey. I hear she has a fantastic podcast. But anyway, I digress. Please enjoy this episode. Hey, Noy, welcome to People Jew Wanna Know podcast. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
Great. How are things in Israel? You're taking a break right now from base. Yeah?
Yeah. I mean, right now things are great. I'm at home at my parents' house. But, you see the news and who knows what's next. I'm pretty hopeful that a war is not going to happen, but also realistic that it may happen.
Yeah. Thanks for continuing to share everything and giving us front row seats into the footage that is not really reported by the news. And on that note, tell us about yourself. What do you do and how did you get there?
All right. So I'm originally from Canada. I moved to Israel when I was 18 to join the army. I joined the paratroopers as a combat soldier, of course, and I just fell in love with the country. I ended up staying in Israel for about 10 years. My brother came to Israel a year later, and my family, followed through, came back home. But for the past 4 years, I've been living in the U.S., 2 years in Michigan, where I did my MBA at the University of Michigan. And most recently, I've been living in New York, where I launched a startup. On October 7th, I was in New York, like probably many of the listeners on this call, and I saw what was happening. So I just took the first flight out to Israel. I was never really big on Instagram. I just started documenting stuff for my friends and my, 1,000 or 2,000 followers. And it turned into like a bigger thing until today. For the past 9 months, I've been fighting in Gaza. I've been on the border of Lebanon. I've been traveling around North America and sharing my story and just waiting to see what's next.
When October 7th happened, you didn't just go to Israel. You went to Israel specifically to serve. And you served in one of the hottest zones, the most dangerous zones in the entire war. Why did you feel compelled to do it?
Look, I mean, for us, October 7th in the U.S. actually started on October 6th. And I remember myself being at home and seeing the videos that came out, seeing this music festival that was attacked, and I started to get texts from my friends, and all of a sudden, both my brothers are already on base, and I'm like feeling so useless in New York, sitting in my, Upper East apartment that I was subletting at the time. And look, once you finish the army at the age of 21 or 22, you have miluim, you have reserve duty. So every year you go and you train. I mean, your whole army service is basically a mix of training and conducting missions, and the training is for war. So when a war actually happens, I'm not just going to sit at home and watch my friends go and fight. There was no question about going to Israel and participating in the war, whether I wanted to or not. Nothing really made me want to go. It was obvious.
Can you talk about some of the things you've seen in Gaza and what left a lasting impression on you? I don't think a lot of even Jewish people that follow the war closely have a good understanding of what really is going on over there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a very optimistic, hopeful person. I always look at the bright side, even in the worst of situations, or I try to at least. And I realized that, number one, the hate there is generational. So you have my parents' age who hate the Israelis. You have the people my age who hate the Israelis. And you also have the younger generation, whether they're 20 years old or 10 or even 5 years old. Like, there was a house that I went into to look for weapons. I come to the room of a 7 or 8 year old girl, and I realized she was 7 or 8 because of the clothes and because of the dolls and the school books. And on the wall, you see posters of martyrs. You see martyrs who are currently sitting in Israeli jail. Like, this 7-year-old girl is looking up to martyrs, to suicide bombers. I think, I'm sure you too, but when I was younger, my posters were of celebrities, musicians, and hockey players. I wasn't looking up to people who conduct attacks. So there's so much hate in Gaza towards Israelis, towards Jews, that it's just everywhere. The only sign of peace and hope that I saw was from the animals. They were like the only ones that didn't hate us over there. And I also think that there's no real desire for peace. They've done, there's statistics and there's polls that show that the Palestinians, most of them, do not want peace with the Israelis. From the river to the sea, which was a slogan that is used mostly in America and Europe, is to remove all the Israelis from Israel. And that's what a lot of the Palestinians think too.
This is hard to hear, but I think the faster that we accept it as the reality, the faster we can move on to a productive solution. And I've been saying this for a while. It's not a PC thing to say, okay? It's not a comfortable, nice thing to say. No one wants to say, hey, I genuinely don't believe none of these people want peace. There are probably people there that want peace. But by and large, I don't think this is a society that is willing to live in any setup where Jews are present and Israelis are present. I don't think they're willing to accept any outcome that involves Jews, like full stop. And I'm tired of pretending like this is not the case. A couple of weeks ago, I brought on an anti-Zionist Jew on the podcast. And for an hour, we talked very calmly. And he kept saying how he is completely distraught by the fact that there's no care about preserving human life, that so many Palestinians have passed as a result of the war, and that this is not the focal point of outrage for the media and for society. And then I asked him, well, how do you hope this would resolve? If you had a magic wand and anything was possible, how does this war resolve? How does this conflict resolve? And he said, I hope for a one-state solution where Israelis and Palestinians have equal rights, they share land, they live together, which honestly is a common point of view for a lot of Israeli activists. There are a lot of smart Israeli activists that call for a one-state solution. And I was like, okay, well, we've tried to do that before, and we had bus bombings, and we had this, and we had that. And we know if we survey the Palestinian people in Gaza and the West Bank, that they don't have a positive sentiment toward Israelis. And he's like, well, I didn't say that there wouldn't be violence. I didn't say that it would be easy. And it's like, well, we started this whole thing about your outrage over preservation of human life. But then by doing a one-state solution, you're okay not preserving that human life. You're just outraged by the human life that we lost as part of the war. Like, I couldn't figure, it felt like a logical fallacy to me.
Yeah, I mean, to go to your first point, look, we know that there have been lives lost on both sides, more lives lost on the Palestinian side. I, as a, Zionist Israeli soldier, I'm not supporting any innocent lives being taken away. It happens. It's part of war, and it's very sad. We also have to ask ourselves, first of all, where are those numbers coming from? How accurate are those numbers from the Gaza/Hamas Health Ministry? We have to ask ourselves also, why are so many innocent lives being killed? Why isn't Hamas building bomb shelters with the billions of dollars they have for their own people instead of putting tunnels under their houses and putting them directly in danger. Again, as an Israeli IDF soldier, I do not support any lives of innocent children being killed, or women, or even men. But you're right. We've been trying to do this time and time again. You see that there's been a ton of attacks. You don't see Israelis going into any, Arab villages and blowing up buses. You don't have, for the most part, right? I'd say 99% of Israelis, they don't want to go and conduct suicide bombings or attacks on innocent Palestinians. That's not what we're trained to do. A lot of people are like, yeah, well, you Israeli soldiers, you just want to go into Gaza, flatten it, and live there. No, we don't. I don't want to live in Gaza. I'm super happy in Tel Aviv, in the north. I don't need to go to Gaza. I really would wish that we could just live in peace. But every single time the Palestinians have gotten closer to Israeli society, they've just created problems. Like you said, they don't want to live with us. They don't.
Yeah, and I wish it were different, and it's hard to come to terms with. But like I said at the beginning, this is the reality of the situation. I think we just need to accept it to move forward. And I'm curious, did you encounter Palestinians when you went into Gaza, or are the zones that you went into, they were already cleared of civilians or people?
We were the first reserve duty unit to go into Gaza, along with a few others, and no one cleared the land before us, so we were the first ones in. That meant that it was mostly terrorists that we were fighting. Eventually, as we moved forward, as time went on, in the months of November, December, we started to see civilians here and there. Not civilians who chose to stay because they were super pro-Palestine, pro-Gaza. They were forced by Hamas to stay there. They told us. I think about 5% of the people that we saw were civilians. After a bit of interrogation, you'd easily crack them. Hamas forced them to stay. They were being used as scouts for Hamas. They didn't actually want to be there. But it was either they stay there and have a chance at surviving, or they say no to Hamas. Hamas just kills them on the spot.
I watched recently a briefing by the IDF. It was a closed briefing. I had the opportunity to attend with a couple of people. One of my Jewish activist friends included me. And they had someone, like a correspondent for the IDF, essentially share different interesting information about the war. And what she said was that for every mile above ground that the IDF has to clear, it is 50 miles below ground that they have to clear for all the tunnels, that the network is so extensive that it's 1 mile above ground, 50 miles below ground. That's the ratio. Did you go underground? Did you see any of those tunnels?
Yeah, so this is something that a lot of people don't understand. Most IDF soldiers, and I would say above 90% of IDF soldiers in Gaza, don't go underground. The reason is that, we've never really trained for it. We've had a bit of training here and there, but it's a war that no one's truly fought before. So that's number one. Number two, Hamas isn't stupid. They know that there are entrances to many tunnels and that IDF soldiers may go into those entrances. So they will booby trap / decorate the entrances of the tunnel with bombs so that even if we get close to it, it'll blow us up. That's number two. So there are specific units, mostly the engineering units. They are the ones that deal with the tunnels, whether going inside, sending a robot inside, or just blowing up the tunnel. They do that. Did we find tunnels? Of course, we found a ton of tunnels, but there's a protocol for us that when we find the tunnel, we back away because it's either going to blow up, a terrorist is going to come up and shoot us, and it's something that we don't want to deal with. One of Sinwar's safe houses, we found this crazy tunnel that it was so deep. We had cameras in there and we saw these tunnels haven't been built for years. They're very sophisticated. They're kilometers long. I'm not going to say too much about this specific tunnel, but as you can imagine, if it belonged to Sinwar, it was one of the more advanced tunnels that were there at the time.
It's wide enough for a car?
I think the wider for the car ones are more in the north that Hezbollah uses. The ones that I dealt with and the ones that I saw were more for human beings, but they did have huge rooms there where, bathrooms that kept hostages, computers. The thing besides Wi-Fi, they have everything in those tunnels, and it's just people don't really understand the depth of how crazy the tunnels are. They don't. They really don't.
And now, most recently, you went to actually go serve in the north. How are you feeling about what's going on in the north with Lebanon?
The north is very different than Gaza. Okay, so just to give you a bit of perspective, when I'm in Gaza, the threat is 24/7. So there could be a terrorist that'll jump out at you at any second. You were always under tension. You were moving slowly. You were looking every single second, and you couldn't breathe properly until you got back to Israel. Now, the north, it's still as much of a threat, maybe even more. There's still threats 24/7. It's still scary, but it's different because for 3 days, it can be absolutely quiet. You can have nothing. You're good. You're fine. But then one day you have suicide drones who are super easy to just send by Hezbollah, get to your base, attack, and then leave. You can purchase any drone and make it into a suicide drone, basically. And I think mentally it's a lot different because in Gaza you feel like you're doing something. You're moving forward. You're with the backpacks. You're there. But up north, you're in some sort of base, whether it's a bunker or not. You need to close the windows in case you do get attacked. You don't want anything to come into the windows. You can't really leave at all. You have to be inside basically 24/7. So it kind of seemed like a jail, to be honest with you. Like it's a small corridor, and every couple of days, just something would happen, a loud bang, at the beginning of when we just got, look, Hezbollah, they know this area better than anyone, better than we do. So when a unit switches another unit, when you go up, when you come down, when things are changing, they know exactly what's happening. And when they see new soldiers or fresh soldiers coming onto the base, that's when they test us. They see how ready we are. During the first week we were on base, a suicide drone attacked us while we were outside. We didn't know we couldn't be outside for that long. 4 soldiers were injured. One is still in the hospital in very, very bad shape. And I'm talking to you about 2 months ago. He was in a coma for a month and a bit. And they were testing us, and they're continuing to test us. And Hezbollah, they have way more weapons and people and everything than Hamas does. So I don't believe that there's going to be a war with Hezbollah, but if there is, it's going to be different than Gaza.
It sounds like the North is more sophisticated, but perhaps a little less risk-friendly, whereas in Gaza, they're less sophisticated, but they're willing to take a more offensive position and attack more often.
Yeah, in Gaza, you have the tunnels. You have some cockroach Hamas terrorists who's sitting there. He knows you're coming, whether it's through hearing you through the cameras they put on. He comes up out of his little hole, he shoots, and he goes back down. Hezbollah, we're not really in Lebanon. We're on the border of Lebanon, so we're there. They know us. We can see them. You have the UN cars driving back and forth. UN, we know it's Hezbollah in those cars. When rockets are being fired, you know where they're coming from. You see it on all the TVs that we have. So they're further from us. But again, their missiles have a much wider reach than the ones that Hamas uses. So I just say Hezbollah is much more dangerous than Hamas, and you saw the damage that Hamas has done so far.
Yeah, absolutely. And what do you think people in the U.S. or the Jews in the diaspora don't understand about the conflict, and what do you wish you could tell them?
I know we're limited on time. I have a lot to tell them, but I think, from my experience going on campuses, I get wanting to support Palestine, feeling what their victim does. I understand what amazing work the BDS has done to get people on their side. People have no clue what's going on here. People right now on campuses are holding both the Hamas and Hezbollah flag. If they only knew, and I'm not talking about Queers for Palestine, which is a totally ridiculous group. If people only knew what Hamas's values were, what Hezbollah valued, they would flop a second. You think that if a gay man walking or a gay person walking into Lebanon or into Gaza, you think that they would accept you? Not a chance. You're a woman that has, more aspiration than a woman who stays at home. You think that you can go and do whatever you want? Yeah, right. Free speech. In America, people can say whatever they want for the most part and not get in trouble. If you say something against the so-called government in Gaza or in Lebanon, you will be killed. There's no question about it. So that's one thing that blows my mind every time I see these different flags. And I think that you can't, we spoke about this earlier, but you can't support, Islam and progressive values at the same time. I respect all religions, and there are, beautiful parts of every religion. But when you are supporting these extreme groups, and you're also saying that you value life, you value all life, there's no such thing. There's no such thing as that. If you are supporting these horrible groups, these terrorist groups, designated terrorist groups, but you also say that all life matters, then you're making a fool out of yourself. As Jews, we have this organization called Birthright, where Jews are sent to Israel every year when they're 18 to 25 to experience to see for themselves. I think we need to have Birthright for non-Jews. Non-Jews to come, or non-supporters even, to come and see what Israel is and then go to Gaza. If they return, it'll be great. But people just have no clue what's going on, and they don't want to learn. They believe everything they see. They believe social media, like the All Eyes on Rafah campaign. Look, genius job by BDS or whoever created it. Really amazing. Besides the fact that there were like mountains in the background, which aren't in Gaza. People are just sharing stuff because it's trendy and because it's cool, and no one has the guts to stand up and actually say, wait, what's going on? What is apartheid? What is genocide? What's an intifada? What does from the river to the sea actually mean? And if people did a little bit of research, not too much, they would start rethinking and not making a fool out of themselves.
You know what I'll tell you after speaking to an anti-Zionist about these kinds of things? I think the question of the whole, they don't support gay rights, they would kill you if they knew you were gay. The perspective of the anti-Zionist, from what I understood, is that sure, they believe these backwards things, and sure, Islamism is completely counter to progressive values. That doesn't mean they don't deserve to live as a free, self-determined nation. So the anti-Zionists who are like the trans activists and the gay rights activists, they're saying, our ideal is that these people still deserve to live in peace and for free and liberated from the occupation, whatever you want to call it. Even though they believe these backwards things, we advocate for their liberation, and we hope that when they become liberated, they will take on these progressive values that we also believe. And it's an ideal, right? Because that's a big if. That's a big bet that you can't justify. And the consequences of making this bet and coming out wrong are consequences that all of society will bear, because we have to live with a nation that supports terrorism and that supports killing gay people and killing trans people. So I don't think they understand that there's a consequence to these things and the risk that they might take on behalf of all of us while they aspire for their ideal, if that made any sense.
Yeah, it does. Look, I get the concept 100%. Why shouldn't
it's a noble concept?
Yeah. Why should the entire community suffer for the actions of some? But we have to remember that on October 7th, it wasn't just Hamas that came into Israel and did what they did. You had Gazan civilians, innocent civilians who came into Israel, who were filming, who were shooting, who were looting, who were raping. Like, this is all, it's videoed. And they even say it. It's not something, it's not a theory. So if you have both the government / terrorist group / whatever you want to call it, who is committing these things, but also the civilians who not only agree, but also take part in doing these things, then yes, you're going to have to pay the price. I really want to know what the world expects us to do. We have a neighbor where, let's say, and I'm being nice right now, 70% of them are rotten apples. 70% of the Palestinians in Gaza want to commit these horrible things, and you have 30% who are pure souls, let's say, and again, I'm being super nice, who absolutely want peace and want to live, alongside Israelis. Are we supposed to just be like, you know what? Okay, let's believe in the 30% and let them run the country and hope for the best? Absolutely not. Israel has been under threat since its establishment in 1948. And let me tell you, my dream is for when my kids turn 18, for them to be able to have the difficulty of choosing between either going to university or going traveling. I don't want my kids to go to the army. The fact that I'm this, big, army guy, influencer, Jewish advocacy thing like that, it's not like my first choice. I'm doing it because I feel the need to. But if we're under constant threat all the time, of course we're going to defend ourselves. Of course we're going to risk our lives. again, there was an interview, I think about a month ago with the armed forces specialist in the US about if October 7th happened in America by a neighboring country, and you had all these people infiltrating your country, based on history, how would you react? And he basically said, very simple, we would just flatten the land of the terrorists where they came from, including the civilians. I mean, like, that's what anyone would do. You do have some armies, few of them, who are like Israel and really try and reduce, the civilian deaths. And, they make decisions. Should we blow this building up or not? Because there is a wanted terrorist, but there are children there too. Most armies wouldn't care. You do have a few, including the US, who rethink. But to anyone who thinks that we enjoy doing this, if we could just flatten Gaza, which we can, why would we send our own soldiers? And hundreds of them have died, some of which I know personally. Why would we send them by foot to go into Gaza? Like, I don't understand.
Yeah, and I'll say the U.S. has flattened other countries and other places many times whenever there was any threat, and there is no criticism of any kind. Whether that's right or wrong is a different debate, but it is definitely an issue of there being extra scrutiny over the case of Israel, which reminds me kind of what Rabbi Manis Friedman said months ago. It's almost upwards of 6 months ago that I interviewed him for the podcast. And he said one of the things he hopes Israel would do differently is stop helping Palestinians in Gaza and Hamas see where the fence is, where the boundaries are. Because he'll say, like, Israel always prides itself on saying, we don't kill civilians. So then what does Hamas do? They dress as civilians. So then it looks like Israel breaks their word. Or we don't shoot hospitals. We don't shoot children. So where does Hamas go set up shop and their headquarters? In the hospital, right? And then Israel spends months trying to prove that Al-Shifa Hospital was a headquarter, which many people still don't believe is true.
Yeah. On one hand, I mean, that's our morals and our values, not to target civilians, not to target hospitals, which unfortunately the world doesn't understand or believe. Another thing I would add to that is, why are we treating Palestinians? I mean, you have a Palestinian who conducts an attack, a terrorist attack. If that Palestinian is in Israel and doesn't die by a suicide bombing or whatever they do, Israel treats them. You have Palestinian terrorists who are being treated in Israeli hospitals. When we would find these terrorists or these civilians in Gaza who were acting as scouts for Hamas or passing on any information to them, we would treat them medically. Hamas would never, ever, ever treat an Israeli soldier or an Israeli. I mean, you even have hostages who came back saying we didn't receive any medical attention. I don't understand what you said earlier, why Israel is basically giving them more information. I don't understand why we treat the Palestinians who conduct attacks. I don't understand why we always try and please everyone. I don't understand why we don't just be our own country, defend ourselves, and not ask so many questions. But it seems like this concept of Hezbollah explanation, we're always trying to explain why we're right and why we're okay. And at the end of the day, it comes to bite us in the butt. Like, it hurts us more than it helps us, but it's still necessary.
It will be so interesting to see, God willing, after this war ends, what that next chapter for Israel will look like. Will we stop explaining ourselves? Will we do something else? What will the future hold? And nobody knows, but maybe by then we will stop explaining and we'll have a different approach. Who knows?
I doubt it. I wish you were right. And I'll tell you what the difference is that for Hezbollah, I mean, Israel does try to have, a strong effort. Office of Hezbollah tries to do some things. The issue is that we're against the BDS. We're against the Palestinian organizations, which are so well organized. They have millions of dollars have been put into these campaigns, into these people. For the past, I think, more than 20 years, the BDS has worked on these relationships with, whether it's the allies, whether it's their own people. And right now they have such strong partnerships, affiliations with all these different people around the world that when something like October 7th happened, all of the allies of the Palestinians showed up for them. We have nothing. We have no consolidated efforts. We do have a couple influencers here and there who make their own posts and everything. But if you realize, when the Palestinians put out a campaign like All Eyes on Rafah, everyone's sharing it. It didn't go viral because Bella Hadid shared it or because any of the celebrities that they have the people. They have the people who feel with them and understand. I don't understand why Israel didn't do a campaign for the Olympics that are coming up. Even before that, we had Pride Month in June. You look at Gaza, you look at Israel, it's obvious, where a gay person would want to be. Why didn't Israel push this huge campaign that the entire world would be finally able to see, maybe not even agree, but just been able to see what happens in Gaza versus Israel if you belong to the LGBTQ community? And for the Olympics, you think that Israel has some sort of campaign? I don't believe so. Maybe one here or there. The Palestinians, I can guarantee you that they're going to come out with crazy campaigns at the Olympics, even though I think, if I'm not mistaken, I'm not sure what the policy with Palestinian flags are. But you're going to see it, you're going to feel it, and they know how to take advantage of the situations, and we don't. We just have explainer videos, which is also part of the problem.
Yeah, we just have high tech. That's what we have.
Yeah.
But we're the startup nation, guys.
Yeah, and the startup nation, it wasn't a campaign. Startup Nation was a book that was written about 15-ish years ago, and it was just put out, and Israel just became the Startup Nation. Why? It's because when people read that book, when people looked at Israel, they really believed the cause. They felt with the cause. Israel felt like, it could grab onto something, and that's how it branded itself. There was no planning towards this, and that's what people gravitate to, things that they identify with. And with the genius minds that we have, Israelis, high-tech invention, like we can do it. Resources aren't put towards it like the Palestinians do.
Absolutely. And let me jump to this. When you're not serving, you're traveling around other countries and cities, and you're doing all sorts of speaking engagements. Has someone asked you a question that has genuinely stumped you?
Yeah, I've heard all the different questions in the book. The hardest question I got was, why do you rape Palestinian women? I'm not sure if you remember, but there was like a thing 3 months ago where IDF soldiers went to one of the hospitals and raped Palestinians. And it doesn't piss me off because it's a crazy question. It pisses me off because people genuinely believe it. The person who asked me this question truly believed that I and my fellow IDF soldiers raped Palestinians. There's only been one known case in all of the IDF's history of some sort of, sexual assault. It was a Druze soldier, so not even Jewish, still respected, they're still part of us. But back in the day, he was talking to a woman, they had something, she gave him permission, but then he stepped over the line. That was years ago. We don't even joke about raping Palestinian women when we're in Gaza or just in the army. It's never even come up. It's not even funny. It's just a value that we have. So the fact that someone looked at me straight in the eye and asked me this, and I felt their anger towards this, that was the hardest question for me. You can ask me about politics. You can ask me about terrorists in front of your face. You can ask me about anything. I'm fine with it. But these claims that are just simply untrue is what kind of, it honestly hurts a little bit.
When you responded to this person, do you feel like they heard you or no?
They heard me. They heard the words that came out of my mouth, but they didn't listen to me. They didn't want to hear, because when someone is so, strong about what they believe, it's really hard to crack them open and show them another perspective. Even myself, while I disagree with many of the things that Palestinians say, I always try and understand the other perspective. Why are they thinking like that? What brings them to say these things? But no, this person just believed that I was a rapist, which is like, I don't even know what to say. Hey, like, that's the way that they were conditioned. That's what they were brought up to believe, or just happen to believe. And look, I know my truth. I know my unit's truth, and I know many other soldiers' truth. We do have a lot of problems in Israel. We definitely have issues when it comes to crime, when it comes to sexual violence, just like every country in the world. But when it comes to soldiers raping Palestinians, it's an absolute lie. It's an absolute nonsense.
Yeah, and looking at this 10, 11 months now into this, what are you doing to take care of yourself? Because you're bonded with these people that you've served with, and you have seen things that you won't be able to explain or even perhaps fully process. How are you taking care of yourself?
It's a very American question.
Yes.
I feel like, every second person in America has their therapist and everyone's like taking care of themselves. And here we're just trying to get through a war. But look, like when my friends after Gaza, after we were released, most of them cleared their minds by going on vacation, spending time at home with their family. Like no one went back to work. Everyone took around a month off to just breathe. But I saw the war that you were fighting in America and in Europe and in Canada. And for myself, this may sound funny, like fighting your war was sort of helping me. So being able to come and join your side gave me that fulfillment of like continuing the war. And then when I came back to Israel for that second part of the northern border, I continued to fight. So am I like seeing a therapist every week? No. Am I, going on a vacation every couple of months like my friends are? No. Am I taking care of myself as I should? Probably not, but we're in a situation right now where there's more important things than breathing and relaxing. And many people will disagree with me here because you need to take care of yourself before you burn out. I just can't bring myself to going back and living a normal life, which is why I'm highly contemplating continuing with these Hezbollah Jewish advocacy efforts instead of going back to my normal tech life where, my biggest issue is this person going to close this deal? My Slack isn't working and such and such.
I completely understand that. And of all the Jewish activists that you've met in the US or Canada or worldwide, is there anyone that you were like, wow, you're so cool?
So cool. I mean, everyone has their niche. I think it's like hard to compare. Like, everyone knows Jacob Zichiel, who like provided us with like a comedic relief during the war, and I've met him a few times, and he's awesome. Aaron Bors is a good friend of mine who was injured. He's not, doesn't have tens of thousands of followers on social media, but he's been standing up. I know the closest person I've gotten to is Michael Rapaport. Michael has been someone who's been a role model for many Jews. He's stood up. He has no filter in a good way. He doesn't give a shit what anyone thinks. He says what needs to be said. I'm sure he's lost followers and brand deals and partnerships. But Michael is a person that he just speaks his truth, whether you like it or not. Some say he's a bit overboard, but we need people to be a bit more extreme to get the word out. He's become a really good friend. I've met him several times. We've FaceTimed randomly, and I've gotten used to it. But my friends are like, "Oh my God, Michael's FaceTiming you. Rapport is here." I'm just like, yeah, he's my friend. He's not some, and that's for me. That's been one of the greater thing of this war is to have someone who's such a, he's a celebrity. He's been in hundreds of movies. He's busy. He has stuff to do. He makes the time to call me and to message me once a week, once every 2 weeks, to check in on me and several other people, and to show that, just because he's in a different social status, it doesn't matter. We're in this together. And that's what's been great about this war, is that people have come together, whether it's the Montana Tuckers who are used to dancing on TikTok and are now making videos, or just the normal person with a couple followers on Instagram. Everyone's come together and loved it. But yeah, huge shout out to Michael, who's been a light in all this war.
I've seen Michael a couple of times at different events. And of course, always there are people like, Michael, can we take a photo? Can we take a photo? And I don't think people notice, but if you look in his eyes, it's always a very sad look. And even in the photos, like he's smiling, but I can tell his eyes are sad. And I think people forget about that. Like how much this whole thing has weighed on him, as much as he's brought us laughter and said, hilarious things about the conflict. If you look in his eyes, it's sadness.
Michael has, and I've spoken to his wife, Kivia, but like Michael has this problem where he can't say no. And he goes overboard and works overtime to continue to see people. And I went for lunch with him last week, sitting at a cafe, and like you said, every 5 minutes, Michael, thank you. Michael, thank you. Can I have a picture? And one thing about him, is that he doesn't say no. You look at a lot of celebrities who have had interactions, and a lot of them just ignore. They don't care. Like, Michael says yes to everyone. I don't know how he does it. And when a soldier comes, Michael will stop what he's doing, give him the time of day, ask him where he's from, ask the soldier if he wants to take a picture, just so the soldier might not feel uncomfortable. Like, he really is, he's just an amazing person.
Yeah, it's awesome that you had a chance to meet these wonderful people and spread the word with them. And as we move forward from this, where do you think the war is headed? What do you think is next for Israel?
I'm the only one saying this, but I don't think that there's going to be a war with Lebanon. I have people from friends to people who work at the, different ministries to officers to just normal people saying, get ready for a war in Lebanon this summer. I hope that we're able to figure out another way. And this might not sound the best, but there's so much more work to do in Gaza. The IDF, which I love and support, continues to say that another battalion has gone down and we've destroyed this percent and that percent. We have so much more work to do. There are tons more tunnels being uncovered every single day. Okay, so a couple, Hamas leaders who are very well respected get eliminated. More come up. We're not close to being done in Gaza in terms of getting rid of Hamas, if we're able to do that, because they're an ideology, not just a terrorist group. And for the North, I do think that if we do decide to go to war with them, it might be more of an offensive approach, not a defensive. It's not going to be like the one in Gaza where we were attacked and then we attacked. I do think that because they are so much more of a sophisticated terrorist group, I don't want to give them the word army, we might not want to take our chances so another October 7th won't happen just from the northern part.
I got you. And as we wrap here, what's a message you want to leave the Jewish people with?
Yeah, the Jewish people and all the allies, actually. Number one, before anything, before you try and be an activist or do stuff, the first thing you have to do is to look inside and be proud of yourself. Be proud of being a Jew. Be proud of being an ally. Be proud of being on the right side of history during this absolutely crazy time that we will never, ever forget. This time that we're going to tell our kids about and our grandkids about. So that's number one. Once you've done that and you've taken a breath, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to stand up to your friends, to your professors, to your colleagues. If you look at the Palestinians, they're everywhere. They're happy. They're proud. They're yelling. They're there. We need to learn from them, actually. They have chutzpah, and that's our thing. We need to be the ones that are always standing up and, look, if it's a safety issue, of course, do what you have to do. But we need to continue to not be afraid, just like Jews have been throughout the entire history, and stand up. And the last thing that I really ask of everyone is to educate yourself. People don't know what's going on. They see something online and then they share it. And then you have an opportunity to explain something to them. You don't need to be a genius to understand what the word, genocide means. You don't have to fly to South Africa to understand what an apartheid is. You don't have to be a PhD to understand slogans like from the river to the sea or intifada, intifada. There are only so many things that the Palestinians and pro-Palestinian supporters say, and it's our job to understand what they are saying and to be able to educate them. I'm not saying go and yell at them and convince them. Go to someone, say, hey, we're friends. Let's go for coffee. I see you posted this thing about Palestine. Could you explain more? I'm interested in hearing more. Let them explain what's going on to you. And again, in a friendly way or non-friendly, whatever you want to do, but I prefer friendly. Just talk to them about what's going on. Actually, this is what an apartheid state is. And what's going on in Israel is ABC from my experience. If it's more of a conversation and you have that direct impact on them, your chance of influencing them or impacting them to be on our side or just to come closer to our side for the next part of the war is much bigger than any influencer, whether it's myself or Michael Rapaport or anyone. We need to understand ourselves and we need to understand them before we go and start to try to educate the rest of the world.
And how can people connect with you on social media and find out more about your work?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm new to this whole influencing thing. Still responding to everyone, so I'm really happy to chat with literally anyone. My Instagram is Leyb, Noyleyb. Or if you're old school, you can just email me, hello@noyleyb.com. I literally talk to people from all over the world. So reach out, follow, send me video ideas. Like, I'm here for you. And that's why I'm doing this.
And the last question for you is one that I ask every single guest of the podcast. Who would you like to nominate for People Do Want to Know?
Okay, so there's two people I want to nominate that you would want to know. One is, her Instagram is Millennial More. She is, I don't want to give too much, but she has such an amazing story, very interesting background. Grew up, was born in Morocco. She's in the States. She has Judaism and Islam, and her world is absolutely, it's an amazing story. So please put her on, and if you need me to connect you, I will. And the second person I want to nominate is my good friend, Corey Feldman. He's no influencer, but he would fly to Israel for reserve duty before the war happened. He would do it every year. He's written a book about his service, if I'm not mistaken. He's a tech founder. He's a Zionist, and he's a really good friend as well. So I would love to see both of them on the podcast, and happy to connect you to both of them.
Perfect. Noy, thank you so much for your time today and for the opportunity to hear your story and your thoughts on all of these things.
Thank you. And keep doing what you're doing and getting our voices out there. You know, a lot of people on Instagram a lot of pro-Israel voices on Instagram are shadow banned. And it's thanks to outlets like these that we're able to, people are able to hear our stories and connect with us. So you keep doing what you're doing. And I was happy to be on this podcast.
If you've enjoyed this podcast, please go ahead and rate us 5 stars. Be the first to hear our episodes by subscribing to People Do Want to Know wherever you get your podcasts. And for exclusive content, follow us on Instagram @People Do Want to Know.